Okay, so Graham is joining us. Just one moment, please. I'm trying to find my notes. Okay, so we have three resource people from Birds Canada: Rielle Hoag, Kristine Hanifen, and Graham Sorenson. Um, Welcome and thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're excited to learn more about chimney swifts. It's a topic that we hear a lot about, and I know there's a lot of work going on in Birds Canada to protect chimney swifts and to protect the habitat that they use, which of course is chimneys. Um, the For the next hour or so, we're going to learn some interesting life history information. The presenters will talk about the Maritime Swift Watch. I know a lot of the people who are present today have been involved in that, watching how many birds go into certain areas, certain chimneys, and watching to see when that happens, when it stops occurring, that kind of information. Um, Kristine Hanifen has worked for an aerial as an aerial insectivore technician. I'm just going to remind people to put on mute because I'm getting some background noise. Um, so Kristine worked as an aerial insectivore technician for Birds Canada during the summer of 2021, completing many chimney swift nest and roost surveys across Nova Scotia. Originally from Guysborough, she now resides in Port Williams, where she is very busy completing a master's degree at Acadia University. Good for you. Studying northern fulmars, Kristine has developed a passion towards avian conservation through her education and summer field positions. Kristine, where are you from in Guysborough?
I'm from Erinville, so just 15 to 20 minutes away from the village of Guysborough itself.
Okay. I have family from Port Felix.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Nice.
Also with us is Graham Sorenson. Graham is currently acting as the Aerial Insectivore Conservation Coordinator for Atlantic Canada and is leading Maritime Swift Watch program. He's worked for Birds Canada for over 3 years and has previously worked in British Columbia where he coordinated volunteer programs and led conservation research. When asked what birds on his wish list, Graham confessed that he's leaving for Costa Rica tomorrow. Oh, you lucky guy. So there's many exotic birds on his list. What's your any particular one, Graham?
Not really. I'm just excited for any and all of them.
I don't blame you. It's a wonderful place to go for visiting for birds for sure. I'd love to go back. And of course, we also have Rielle Hoag joining us. Rielle is currently working as an aerial insectivore program technician with Birds Canada and is primarily focused on chimney swifts. She's worked for Birds Canada in the past to monitor and protect piping plovers and other shorebirds. Throughout her undergraduate and master's degrees, she worked alongside Birds Canada to study Leach's storm petrels, and we had a presentation on Leach's storm petrels earlier this year. It was really interesting by Laura Tranquilla. Rielle loves Leach's storm petrels, of course, and on her wish list is the northern gannet, which she's hoping to see up close. Really?
Well, yeah, I kind of panicked. I've seen them before. I'd like to work with them. The one I've seen up close was very unwell, so I would like to see a nice, happy, healthy one up close.
Yeah, not recently at Heartland, was it?
No, this was a few years ago on Country Island.
Yeah, Country Island, Guysborough County.
Yep.
Okay, and I understand that you're going to begin the presentation for us, Rielle. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. So you can start anytime. Thank you very much and welcome.
Well, thank you. Share my screen here. And make that. There we go. Okay, so thank you for the introduction. So I'm set to talk about chimney swifts today, and I'll just get right into it. So who are we? Birds Canada is a nonprofit charitable organization that aims to drive action to increase the understanding, appreciation, and conservation of birds in Canada. We work with thousands of volunteer citizen scientists to conduct monitoring alongside targeted scientific research projects to identify population changes and help direct conservation planning. And in fact, I recognize a few names on the call list today. I think I've met a few of you out doing piping plover work and other shorebird work. So thank you. We partner with many different organizations. We deliver public engagement and outreach activities. You can see a few photos here. We work with kids, adults, all the ages. And we use science-based advocacy and on-the-ground actions to conserve birds. Oops. Okay. So just a quick overview. Today, again, talking about chimney swifts, the Swift Watch program, and how you can get involved. We'll talk a little bit about the 2021 field season, and then how you can do nest and roost surveys and how we do them. And we'll have a quick update by Kristine, and then the usual wrap up. So what is a chimney swift? Many of you may have seen these before, but I'll go into great depth on all the details about them. They're a small, dark, cigar-shaped bird with long, narrow wings. In fact, every description I've seen of them starts with a flying cigar as their descriptor. They have a high chittering call that can be heard from high up in the sky on a clear, sunny, warm day. In fact, you'll almost always hear them before you see them, and I've heard them many times walking around Wolfville in the summertime. They have a quick, jerky flight pattern that's pretty similar to bats, and they'll put on an absolutely spectacular show when they're returning to their roosts at dusk. I've been treated to it a few times. You'll see them gathering and then swirling into this chimney just at impossible speeds in the evenings. Although morphologically they appear pretty similar to swallows, they aren't closely related, and in fact they're more closely related to hummingbirds. Just some quick diagnostic notes is that swifts have a very short tail, where swallows tend to have a longer or at least a distinct tail while they're flying. And also you'll almost never see swifts perching like you will with other similar birds. They belong to the family Apodidae, which means footless. That isn't entirely true. They actually do have feet. They just have very, very short, stumpy legs. And like I said, they can't perch like songbirds. So you'll always see them if they're perched, they'll be vertically on a wall. And that's because all their toes are pointed upwards, so they kind of hang. Something else that helps them perch on these vertical surfaces is their tail. Their tail's very stiff, and it has these longer needle-like projections sticking out of the back there. I don't know if it's on your screen, but my screen is kind of cut off, but you can see the spiky tail. I'll close this. Here we go. Yes. Okay. And actually their genus name means needle tail, Chatura. Males and females have identical plumage. So you can't really tell them apart in flight, but the males are heavier. They spend their days catching insects on the wing, much like swallows, nightjars, and flycatchers, and thus they're in the aerial insectivore group. Their bill is deceptively small. It's only about 5 millimeters long, but it disguises an absolutely massive gape that extends back to about the middle of their eye. And they use that to scoop up insects, and they can eat up to 1,000 or more a day. They're great helpers to have around. So chimney swifts nest and roost in large cavities. Historically, these used to be large hollow trees and caves. But when Europeans arrived, logging and agriculture practices reduced the availability because mostly these occurred in old growth forests. Instead, chimney swifts now used, spoiler alert, chimneys and other human-made structures for both nesting and roosting. They roost in groups of a few individuals up to a few thousand. So you might see a few individuals when you're looking at a roost, but you could be treated to a really nice show. But that said, they actually only nest in pairs with only one pair per chimney. So that's a good way to tell the difference on how they're using a chimney. They begin breeding around the age of 2. They're monogamous, and so that means they have the same mate forever, as long as their mate is alive and kicking around. They return to the same nest site each year, which hold on to that in your head because that's important. We'll talk about it later. They build a small 10-centimeter nest. You can see that in the photo at the bottom. It's very tiny. They use their saliva to glue their twigs together and also to stick it to a vertical surface like a chimney. They typically lay about 4 eggs, but they can lay a few more than that if pressed. And here in Nova Scotia, they only really lay 1 clutch per year, but in warmer climates, sometimes they can lay a second nest, and particularly if their first nest fails, but that doesn't happen here. Aside from the parents, like I said, only one pair of swifts will use a chimney for breeding, but sometimes 1 to 2 non-breeding helper swifts will assist with the raising of the young, which is pretty cool. Typically, their nest success is around 70 to 86%, and on average, they'll raise about 3 young that will survive to fledging. So here are some example photos of other sites that chimney swifts may use. They'll use the dark corners of a barn or even a well to make that have a nice rough surface for attaching a nest, and it provides some protection from predators. One of the ones I found to be the coolest was inside of a well, so you'd never think to find a bird nest there. So just a few more fun facts before I move on. In nice weather, chimney swifts will remain on the wing for the entire day, foraging for insects, and they only land when they're returning to the roost for the evening. Just about everything they do while flying. So as I said, they'll eat their insects, and they'll also skim across the surface of a lake or a river to get their water. And all those twigs that they use for their nest, they break off of the tips of tree branches, also while flying. They're seasonal residents in Atlantic Canada, so they arrive here in May and they leave around September. They winter in South America and they breed throughout Central and Eastern North America. So you can see that kind of peachy color is their breeding range, and we're just at the very northern tip of that range. So they use roosts in their wintering range during migration and in pre and post breeding. Non-breeders and failed breeders will also use roosts outside of helping breeders and migrating. They arrive here in May, breed in July, and then they begin their journey to South America again in late August. And this migration can be up to 10,000 kilometers. In general, aerial insectivores have faced severe decline since the 1970s. So this includes your flycatchers and swifts and swallows and nightjars. So this decline is in Canada. In particular, chimney swifts have declined about 90% since 1970. Some local populations seem to be stable or increasing in more urban areas, but we don't know all of the areas that they occur. All the roosts and nests. Globally, they're listed by IUCN as vulnerable, and in Canada by CSIWC, they're listed as threatened. There are a number of contributing factors rather than just one overarching cause. And this ranges from habitat loss to insect declines to timing mismatches between prey and predator. So while some groups are doing well and even increasing, like your waterfowl and birds of prey, many bird species and groups have been declining across Canada since 1970. And you can see that aerial insectivores are in the lowest corner of this figure in the pink, and they're facing the most severe declines of any groups of birds in Canada. So just to put this in perspective, aerial insectivores decline represents about 160 million individuals across Canada in the US. It's a pretty crazy number. So one cause of the decline is decline of prey. So their aerial insect prey that they feed on. This is likely due to widespread pesticide use and changes in weather due to climate change. Both aerial insectivores and aerial insects are very sensitive to changes in climate variability and patterns. So like, for example, insects might emerge at a different time with the changing weather patterns. Climate change can cause increased frequency and severity of weather events. and storms can cause birds to be killed or blown off course during migration. These can cause massive die-offs and can contribute to poor nest success during the breeding season. And then on to habitat loss. This is another contributing factor. Chimney swifts are a little bit unique in that a lot of their habitat loss is now human-made habitat. So this can come in the form of lost chimneys due to conversion to different heating sources, the capping and lining of chimneys, and the demolition of old buildings with large chimneys favored by chimney swifts for roosting. So many of the chimneys that they use now have been built back in the 1960s or earlier. So as you can imagine, some are really old and in poor shape, and they either need to be heavily renovated or just to be destroyed. So one option for renovating is to place a metal liner, which for the homeowner, that's great. It's relatively cost effective. They're flexible, but for chimney swifts, they can't actually use the metal liners. They're too slippery. So just something that's good to do if you do replace your liner in your chimney with a metal one is to put a cap on it so that chimney swifts can't get in. Because if they get in, they can get stuck there, and that, as you can imagine, is not very good. So in addition to chimneys themselves changing and being lost, new houses don't need masonry chimneys in most cases. So very little new human-made habitat is replacing the old. And in addition to this, there's no new old growth. That sounds very redundant. Anyway, there's no new old growth forest habitat with old hollow trees. So this results in a net loss of habitat. Outside of their breeding habitat, backpedal a little bit. So as I mentioned earlier, chimney swifts return to the same site every year. So if they come back and their nesting chimney's gone, they have to put in effort and time and energy into finding a new nesting site, if one is even available. Okay. And then outside of their breeding habitat in South America, logging and forest fires in the Amazon is also reducing their roosting habitat. So for all these reasons, regular monitoring is important to detect population changes. And this is where citizen science plays an important role, which I'll get to now. So the Birds Canada Aerial Insectivore Conservation Program, it's true to its name. It exists to conserve aerial insectivores across Atlantic Canada, obviously. This includes swallows and, of course, the focus of today's presentation, swifts. Our goals are to monitor population size and trends, support and encourage stewards who protect aerial insectivores and the habitat they use, including placing signs like the one on the right here, and a swift-friendly property sign. And we engage the agriculture industry and promote beneficial practices. So part of this program is the Swift Watch program, which began in 2010. It takes place in Ontario and the Maritimes. And of course, in the Maritimes, we're called Maritime Swift Watch. Clever. So Swift Watch brought together many organizations that independently monitored chimney swifts, and it's all under a standardized protocol. The goals of Swift Watch are to evaluate chimney swift population trends, support stewardship, and evaluate ongoing conservation measures. Swift Watch is largely dependent on volunteers and landowner support for monitoring and protection, and partner projects in Quebec, Manitoba, and the US are important for widespread population monitoring of chimney swifts. So with the help from volunteers, we collect data at roost sites to help us look at population trends over time, and this allows us to determine a measuring stick for evaluating the effectiveness of ongoing conservation actions. This is why monitoring is so incredibly important, because if you don't monitor, you can't detect these changes and to see how effective things are. We search for nest and roost sites for stewardship and monitoring. We support landowners and volunteers as stewards for chimney swifts and their habitat to maintain high quality nest and roost sites. And finally, we facilitate research through partners to guide recovery efforts. Next, there we go. So here are some maps of roost and nest sites visited in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia in 2021. The green dots are nests and the blue dots are roosts. So between nest and roost sites, 131 were visited altogether in 2021, which is, wow, impressive. 90% of all known chimney swift sites were visited in New Brunswick last year, and about 71% of known sites were visited in Nova Scotia. So here's an example of some roost counts from the Bridgetown Artificial Roost and the New Glasgow Temperance Street Elementary School Roost. As you can see, there is a peak in counts in the green section on each plot, and this represents spring migration in late May and early June. After the peak, particularly in the Bridgetown Roost, you see a lull, and there is still that kind of a dip in the New Glasgow one. And this is during nesting when most birds are busy building nests, laying and hatching eggs, and supporting their hungry chicks. Roost chimneys can still be used in this period by non-breeders and failed breeders, which is why you may not see the roost count drop to 0. In red, you can see another spike in the roost counts, and this represents them gathering for fall migration as they prepare to leave for South America. So you may have heard me say the word artificial when I was talking about the Bridgetown Roost. In 2019, the original roost in Bridgetown was demolished, but prior to that, a group of experts got together and quickly made a plan that resulted in building an artificial roost chimney nearby to the building that was being demolished. They did their best to replicate the original chimney because as humans, we can't really know the exact reasons why birds might be why birds might choose a chimney. We can guess at dimensions like the diameter of the chimney and the height and all those things, but you know, birds might like the location and the smell or the view or some other reason that we can't fathom. So it was really important that they tried to get everything as similar as possible to try and ensure success. So as I mentioned, chimney swifts do like to return to the same site every year, so artificial chimneys aren't always successful. In this case, it wasn't possible to retain the original chimney, so they built the new one, and there's been rigorous follow-up monitoring happening from 2019 through 2021, and thankfully they've been very successful, and it's been adopted by the swifts. So happy story, and that's a picture of the chimney there on the left. You can take a look at. So here are the roost counts going back to 2017 at the New Glasgow School. As you can see, this roost seems to get high numbers in the middle, into the middle of June before they really drop off when birds begin seeking out their nest sites. We're missing 2020, we're missing most of 2020 information for everywhere. I think everybody can probably take a guess at why. So I won't go into that too much, but anyway. Okay. So here is a summary of the total number of chimney swift sites visited in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia from 2010 through 2021. As you can see, after a lull in 2020, 2021 saw a huge uptick in sites visited in both provinces. It's wonderful to see the number of sites growing because it just means more sites we can monitor and hopefully protect for future generations of swifts. Here's a summary of the volunteers and staff in the field doing chimney swift surveys in each year. The numbers on this plot are actually a bit low because the numbers in my spreadsheet come from who entered the data, not necessarily who counted it, who counted the swifts. In reality, we had about 45 volunteers with 95 assistants conducting roost and nest surveys in 2021, which is awesome. Of course, with the pandemic and people not being able or as comfortable moving around, we did see fewer volunteers in 2020. Hopefully things are better this year, and we look forward to seeing new and returning volunteers in the field this spring and summer. So here are the mean chimney swifts seen per chimney over the past 12 years. In both Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. As you can see, Nova Scotia's mean count is a little bit more reflective of lack of ability to do things than a true dip in site use. Chimney swifts are stable or increasing in many urban areas, but we still need to find and monitor more sites to get a good picture of how the population is doing. So how do we gather these data, and how can you gather these data if you choose to volunteer with us? To begin with, we need to locate new nests and roosts or monitor existing ones. Could be some follow-up information. Roosts are easiest to detect at dusk in late May and early June, and then again in late July and early August. You may see birds entering chimneys in between these times, but numbers are likely to be lower since almost everyone is off breeding. If you think you found a suspected chimney swift roost, first, please contact us. That'd be awesome. We'd love to hear from you. And if you can't get out to it, we might be able to send somebody out to check it out. If you are going to go do the survey, visit the site at least half an hour before sunset. If you see swifts, stay to count until 15 minutes after the last swift enters the chimney or until it's too dark to count. Remember that this can range, or the birds can range from a few individuals up to a few thousand. So don't get discouraged if you don't see many birds. And also, especially in between the migration periods, you might not see any birds on a given night. So it's always good to check for a few nights if you don't see any. So this method is what we use during the National Roost Monitoring Count. This is conducted on the same dates across their breeding range in Canada. So that's the chat. 50 bird. Oh, thanks, Ken. Okay. A little sidetrack there. So yeah, we do these counts on the same dates across Canada, across the breeding range in Canada. So that's Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Quebec, Ontario, and Manitoba. In 2022, these dates are on May 21st, which is an optional first date to catch early migrants. And it's a great day to practice if you've never done the count before. And then the required dates of May 25th, May 29th, June 2nd, and June 6th. You don't have to remember those dates. I was just saying them so you could get a date range in your head. Those dates and the SwiftWatch protocol are available on our website. So once these counts have been completed, the counts are added up on each date, and this helps us get a minimum population count for Canada. The reason it's a minimum is because A, we can't know that we've actually found all of the roosts, but also not all of the roosts are always counted. So outside of these dates, we monitor roosts to get a sense of activity at each, and I saw Ken did pop something in the chat there. You can put your counts into eBird or Nature Counts, and those data are great to have. It helps us see what the swifts are doing throughout the season. So for nests, breeding happens in July, so that's the best time to detect nests. Like us, chimney swifts prefer warm, windless, cloudless days, so those are the best times for watching swifts coming and going from a chimney as they feed their young. If you suspect a nest, again, please tell us. You should watch the site for about an hour or until you see a swift enter or exit the chimney. On one of those nice days, it's a great time to take a lawn chair and just go park by a chimney with your binoculars. It's good to let us know even if you don't see any swifts so that we have it for our records. Okay, so if you'd like to get involved in helping us collect more info about chimney swifts, please contact us at the email below. We can chat about roosts that you can help monitor, and for nests, keep an eye out for nesting behavior, and please report it to us via email or through eBird or Nature Counts so we can continue keeping an up-to-date record of nest and roost locations. And Kristine, are you ready to chat? Because I have your slides up next, and you can just tell me when to hit the next button.
Okay, sounds good. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here tonight. I guess I'll turn my video on. Yeah, so I had a fantastic summer traveling around Nova Scotia, conducting roost and nest surveys for chimney swifts. I saw quite a bit of chimney swift activity. As you can tell from this slide, I got lots of great photos of them. Unfortunately, they were a little too quick and fleeting for me to get pictures of this summer. But I do have a nice collection of chimney photos now. So for the most part, this summer I did nest surveys after the breeding birds dispersed from the roosts. And many of these nest sites are located at private residences in both urban and rural areas. And so traveling to these sites brought me to many beautiful, new to me areas of the province. And I got to meet a lot of very kind people. I actually never encountered a single unkind or unwelcoming person this summer, and was even offered a freshly homemade muffin at one place, which was really nice. So if I knocked on the door to any of your homes here tonight, this summer, thank you. Your kindness and interest in Chimney Swift stewardship made my job a lot easier. And that leads me to a quick story I would like to share from the summer, when I unexpectedly discovered a new nest site. I had taken the morning off one day in early June to help a friend of mine move out of a place she was renting nearby. And we had just finished packing up our vehicles and were standing outside chatting when I heard the unmistakable chittering sound of chimney swifts overhead. And I looked up and there was a pair of them flying around above the house. And then I saw them fall into the chimney. So this was very unexpected and really exciting to see at a previously unknown site. And my friend was also very excited and kind of wishing she wasn't moving. And a few moments later, the property owner came out to say goodbye to my friend. And I knew I had to tell her about this, but I was a little bit nervous to suddenly inform her that there are birds taking up residence in her chimney. But luckily, she reacted very positively and was very happy to be able to provide a safe space for these chimney swifts to nest and raise their young. And we had a great chat, and she's now a proud chimney swift property steward. And I returned a couple more times to that site to do some nest and roost surveys. So that was one of my favorite stories from the summer. Rielle, you can go to the next slide now. Another highlight was occasionally having some friendly company during my surveys, like these guys here. These are just the ones I got photos of, but I met many dogs, cats, chickens, and ducks on my journeys this summer. And I just adore all animals, so that always made my day. You can go to the next slide. So chimney swift monitoring was the primary focus of my work this summer, but I also occasionally got to speak with people about swallows that are taking up residence on their property, and helped some people join the volunteer program as swallow property stewards, such as my parents, which is where I took these photos at their property. My dad has always been very proud of the tree and barn swallows that come to our place each summer for as long as I can remember. So it was nice that I got to help them join this program and provide them with this sign to display. You can go to the next slide. And this is a video, a quick clip that I took at the Acadia University Roost in late May. It was just taken with my cell phone, so it's not great, but hopefully you can see some swifts there. And yeah, while this is playing, to finish off, I'd just like to say, I think the biggest takeaway for me from this summer was that there are a lot more people out there than I had previously thought that care about even the smallest birds we have. Initially, I was a little nervous about the reaction I may receive when approaching people at their homes to talk about these small brown chimney dwelling birds. But I was really blown away by how positive all my experiences were and how accommodating people were willing to be. And yeah, it gives me a little bit of hope for the future of this at-risk species. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristine.
Oops, I just played the video again. Okay, so thank you to all of our volunteers, partners, and sponsors, and to all of you. If you haven't already, please reach out if you'd like to get involved. And you can also follow our Facebook and Twitter pages for updates, and check out the Swift Watch website as well. And you can always send an email to marswifts@birdscanada.org if you have any questions. And now it's your turn to talk. Thanks for listening. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. They're really interesting birds, aren't they? I love their little tail feathers. You never see them. I've never seen them that close to be able to see those spiky little tails.
Yeah, they're really cool.
So I'll just ask, does anyone have questions? Maybe I'll start because I have a question, if that's okay with folks. You know how when we try to mimic bird nesting sites, so these are not the only birds that have trouble because of the lack of old growth forests. Owls, for example, we create nest boxes because there's not very many large trees for owls. And so I just wondered why we are replicating chimneys, which are, I guess, their newer home, rather than trying to replicate trees that we would find in the wild. Like, has there ever been an attempt to create a nest-like structure that looks more like a tree than a chimney? And if so, has that been successful?
I'm not sure of the answer to that. Maybe, yeah. I don't know. I mean, fundamentally, they if they want to use them, they want to use old growth forests, and it takes a long time for a forest to get old. Like, ideally, yes, we'd have that habitat, but I don't know if anybody's tried to replicate an actual old tree. But I think, I don't know, Graham, if you'd like to speak about maybe on the new chimney fund at all for habitat restoration.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question either. That would be interesting to see if they'd take to something that looks like a hollow tree more than they'd take to a artificial chimney. But I'll have to dig around to see if there's anything about that. I did want to share, just last week, Birds Canada launched a new program called the Chimney Swift Chimney Restoration Fund. I'll put the link in the chat here in a second. But this is a fund because chimney swifts relies so much on these much older buildings and chimneys that are falling apart or getting degraded. And the easiest solution for people is to put caps on them or put metal liners on them. But then chimney swifts lose that habitat. So this fund provides kind of matching funding for people that want to renovate their chimney, but do it in a way that keeps chimney swifts there, as long as that chimney has been shown to support chimney swifts in the past. So if any of you know of people or have chimney swifts in your own chimneys and you know you need chimney restorations done, this is a great fund to reach out. You can reach out to me and ask questions. It's a relatively simple application, and there's no guarantee of funding, but we want as many people to apply as we can. And the more people we have applying, the more we can kind of leverage that this is an important program and people want to upgrade their chimneys in a way that benefits chimney swifts. So I'll pop a link to that in the chat as well.
Rielle, can I ask you to stop sharing so we can just see more people? Then I can see if there's people who have their hands up. Also, people might be putting questions in chat, so I'm going to check there as well.
Yes, I see a few things in the chat.
Oh, so if you want to read some out of the chat, you're welcome to do that.
Sure.
I know one of them is from Carol Clark asking if there's places within HRM, so the Halifax Regional Municipality, where chimney swifts, where there's a chimneys that host chimney swifts.
Yes, but off the top of my head, I can't tell you where. Maybe, I don't know, Graham or Kristine maybe could answer that question better than I could. I haven't actually been out to the sites. I just look at all the data.
There are a couple nest sites. There's no Roost that we know of, I don't think. Yeah, I can't remember how many, but one of them was a new discovery last year, I think. So yeah, they're nesting in the HRM at least.
Yeah, it looks like there's 6 or 7 nest sites that we have in the database and know about. There are likely many more, and so this is where we need to keep telling people that we're interested in knowing anytime there's a chimney swift nest discovered, because it helps us protect those chimneys if we know where they are ahead of time.
And Elizabeth Jones from St. Mary's River asked if there were particular plants that we could grow that would draw in the insects that would be beneficial.
That's a great question. I have no idea. I know Graham, I was talking to Laura and she's looking to, she's really interested in that. So that's something that we're interested in, but as far as I know, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's definitely some of these kind of bigger aquatic habitats that are generating the large amount and diversity of insects that are what swallows and swifts need. There are plants that you can grow that'll bring in native pollinators and maybe won't benefit swifts directly, but will benefit native pollinators, will benefit hummingbirds, and will benefit other bird species. I can pop another link in the chat. Birds Canada last summer started this great program called Gardening for Birds. And so it's a website where you can look up your specific region and your specific lawn type. So whether you have a shaded lawn or a really wet lawn, and find plant species that are native to that area and will do well in your property.
That's great. Thank you. Ken, you had a question. If you could take yourself off mute, please.
Yes, I noticed an announcement today of funding from the federal government to renovate Roost. And I know that the Temperance Street School, well, Temperance Street Apartments now, it's not school anymore. The Temperance Street Apartments chimney was built in the 1890s. So it's, it's probably in a bit of disrepair, although I think it was fixed up when it was changed into apartments. But I'm wondering, does Bird Studies intend to contact the owner to tell them that there is probably funds available for him to fix up the chimney, or is it responsibility of the owner of the building to search it out himself? He probably would never know.
Good point.
Yeah, for chimneys like that we know about, either through our database or, I mean, it's great you shared that. I'm new to the program, so I don't know the history of all these chimneys, but we will absolutely reach out to the owner. And if people know of other chimneys like this where the owner's not going to find out on their own about this fund, please let us know, and we'll reach out and share that this funding is available, and can help with applications to some extent as well.
And you might also mention, Graham, I don't know if you have this information at hand, but there are a number of organizations that have already signed up, including Nova Scotia Bird Society, to be members of the committee that's looking after that fund in Nova Scotia, or at least participate in that project. So Angela McDonald of Nova Scotia Bird Society is joining the group shortly, I think. Right, Angela? Angela may be busy. And
Yep. Yes, I am. Yep.
Great, thank you, Angela. And there are other groups, I think Blomidon naturalists maybe, and
Yeah, there are a few. I don't know if Blomidon's part of it yet, but the other important thing is that if it's a project that one of the groups that's a partner in the fund is really interested in, so if it's a really important chimney and the Nova Scotia Bird Society decides they want to help with that chimney, having that group apply alongside the owner of the chimney really helps the application. And so it's another reason to tell Birds Canada, and if we can write a letter of support or help with the application, it's much more likely to get funded.
that's great, thank you.
Yep.
Barry McLaughlin wanted to know if the Roost in the library building in Truro is still active. In the past, they have set fireworks off of the roof of the building over the July 1st weekend. She had recently asked a recreation group about this, and they were told that it was okay to do that. Does that anyone recall the story with that? July less?
Yep, it's still active. I'm the volunteer for monitoring the roosting site there. So yeah, there's still chimney swifts going to that roosting site, and I think the numbers may have dropped off after the first year after the fireworks were set off, but they seem to be coming back.
Are they still setting off fireworks on July 1st from that building?
I think that was a one-time thing. So they haven't in recent years.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that I had that discussion with Allie once a few years ago. I think the only reason anybody would say it was okay is if they knew there were no swifts in the chimney at the time, but otherwise I can't see someone saying, yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
It's probably a very heavily cautioned go for it.
I would think so. Ken also offered that Pat Mackay had found a nest site in Dartmouth within the last 2 years. I don't know where that is in Dartmouth, but I'm sure Pat Mackay would tell us if she were here. Greg Turner wanted to know how far from a roost site the swifts will travel to nest.
I don't know the answer to that one myself.
Do you know how far they would travel to in search of food?
I don't know exact numbers for nesting. I think it can be a pretty big radius, but to some extent there is a bit of a network of if you have a big roost, you'll have most of those chimney swifts kind of within a radius around that, and then that'll overlap to some extent with the radius of chimney swifts nesting from another roost. There's been some interesting work trying to look at how this network of roosts is interconnected and how much chimney swifts actually use multiple roosts. But I don't know the actual distances that they'll fly.
A few years ago, there were quite a few, like less, maybe around 10 at the Frog Pond in HRM just off the Brussels Cove Road. And I wondered that too, like where were they nesting, where were they roosting? Anyway, maybe they were in Dartmouth. We'll find out. Hopefully we'll find out more information from this, from people getting more interested and connecting with Birds Canada about what they're seeing. Les asked how many nesting sites that you know of. How many nesting sites do you know of in Nova Scotia? He had noticed that in Riley's map that, Rielle presented that most of the nests were in the valley.
Yeah, I can't remember the number. I had it written down and I tossed my paper, but I think it's at least 40 nest sites. It's possibly more than that. That's just what we know of, and also it just also could be that more people are monitoring the valley. They can nest in abandoned sheds and abandoned buildings, old wells. Like there's so many places they could be nesting that we're rarely going to see them. They could be nesting in an old tree in the middle of the woods. So yeah, there are all these known sites, but there's so many unknowns, and it's kind of exciting.
I'm going to start carving trees, so maybe we'll get them at Mama. Kevin Lance recommended a book that people can see on the chat, Chimney Swift Towers, New Habitat for America's Mystery Birds. It's a book by Georgian Z. Kyle and Paul D. Kyle. That'd be an interesting, I don't know, if maybe Kevin, if you want to take yourself off mute, if you've read it, you could tell us a little bit more about it. And Susan Holmes said that it was mentioned that there had been massive die-offs, and she wanted to know if they were caused by extreme weather in Canada and what weather changes are most concerned for swifts.
So that would more so be during migration. It may not necessarily be in Canada. It could be anywhere along their migration route, really. But any extreme wind that can blow them off course, or rain that can cause hypothermia or starvation. And I mean, extreme rain can also get into chimneys as well. So it can reduce their nesting success in that way, but also when they're flying, they tend to stay inside the chimney on cruddy rainy days. So the more cruddy rainy days there are, the less food they're getting for themselves and for their nestlings. So that's also kind of a slower kill, maybe not a massive die off, but it's still not good.
And I had another question about what you knew about when and how they transitioned. What, I understand why they transitioned, because the number of trees were so few, so they had to find another space. But any information on the first known time that they used a man-made or human-made structure? That's a good question.
I think there's some records of chimney swifts having used chimneys in indigenous buildings or indigenous log cabins where they have a chimney coming out. And so there's some kind of early records of that. But then as settlers came in, there's masonry chimneys that have really nice interiors to grip on and that kind of thing. That's when they really kind of transitioned and started switching habitats a lot.
Ken has his hand up again, I think. Ken, would you like to ask a question or make a comment?
Yes, when Rielle mentioned conditions in Nova Scotia that might have contributed to die-offs, there certainly has been a number of events, including people who live next door to the Temperance Street apartments in New Glasgow have said that in years past, there have been many times of cold, snowy weather when the birds first come back in early May, and birds being, frozen and, just lying on the ground. Also, we've had a couple of late hurricanes in the fall, in October, even in November, when chimney swifts were here by the hundreds, and no doubt, I would think many of those have perished.
Yeah, and those weather extremes, I think, are becoming more frequent with climate change. So that's a little bit disconcerting for sure. Any other questions? Okay, well, on behalf of the members of the Nova Scotia Bird Society, I'd like to thank you all, Rielle, Graham, and Kristine, for this excellent presentation on chimney swifts. We will post it on YouTube, so people who were not able to attend tonight will be able to have a chance to see it and learn more about the history and what we can do to help them. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.